Imagine for a moment that you lose your job and you're unable to get a new one. All you have left is your savings and any other sources that are providing you with consistent, reliable income each month. How long would you be able to comfortably survive while keeping your current lifestyle? 3 months? A year? 2 years? For the vast majority of people, the amount of time they could survive is not very long. And so what do most people do? Well, they do what school and society has conditioned them to do for the first 18 to 22 years of their life. They pick a skill, they specialize in it, and they find employment at a company that will give them a paycheck. They feel like they have to do this, because if they don't, well, then they couldn't survive. But because of what's taught, or more importantly, what isn't taught in our current education systems, most people believe that this path is the only realistic path for them, and they never put meaningful time or energy exploring, could there be a better way? It's an unfortunate reality because when you do the math, you have 7 days in a week. If we assume that on average, 1 day, or at least half a day on the weekends, goes to chores like laundry, dishes, cooking, shopping, random errands, and that for 5 days a week, you spend most of the day at work, that means that most people are willingly trading about 75 to 85% of their free time in the youngest and healthiest years of their lives, working for someone else's business out of fear that that is their best path to a comfortable survival. There is simply no other realistic alternative in most people's minds. Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki tells the true stories of his childhood and adult life, where he was essentially raised by 2 dads, his actual biological dad, an extremely well-educated man who walked the well-paved path of academia and a stable career, but never had too much financial success to show for it, and his best friend Mike's dad, a high school dropout turned a multi-millionaire business magnate who was generous enough to mentor Robert throughout his life. In this video, we'll be going through a detailed summary of the book. We'll explore the advice Robert's poor dad gives him at various points in his life, advice that is sure to resonate with many of you because it's the same common, tried and true advice we've been hearing all our lives, in school and from our parents and friends. And we also get to explore the advice Robert's rich dad gives him, advice that dares to break all the conventional rules, and all the things we all too quickly assume to be infallible facts. Advice that would eventually lift Robert from a lower middle-class childhood to an early retirement in his mid-40s as a self-made multimillionaire, enabling him to spend the rest of his life on things he actually enjoys, like traveling and spending time with his loved ones. I'll also go into how I've personally been applying these same concepts and principles in my own life as well. Now, without further ado, let's dive in. Lesson 1. The rich don't work for money. You're doing it backwards. The poor and middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. Robert's rich dad didn't like that school taught kids through books, and he preferred teaching through real-world experiences, because that was more realistic to how life itself teaches you. So here's how his first lesson went. He hired Mike and Robert to work at one of his comic book stores for a mere 10 cents an hour on Saturdays, which was a tiny amount even back then. And then, he completely left them alone. After weeks of working and not learning anything, Robert became fed up that he was losing his weekends to earning such small amounts of money, and he went to go see Rich Dad to tell him that he was quitting. Rich Dad said that he was expecting this day to come, and then he told Robert that he has learned his very first lesson through first-hand experience. And that lesson was this: that working for other people sucks, because you'll always be at the mercy of whoever is paying you, and that the only way out is to figure out ways to make money work for you, not the other way around. To really drive the point home and to test the boys, Rich Dad gave them an ultimatum offer. He could either raise their wages to a whopping $5 an hour, which was an insanely high amount for the time, or he would reduce their wages to $0 while continuing to mentor them. While it was extremely tempting to take the money, both boys opted for the latter and worked for free for a couple of weeks, which forced them to really open their eyes and find better ways to make money. They finally had an idea where they took old comic books that the store no longer needed and created a comic book museum at their house where they charged other kids 10 cents for a 2-hour admission into the museum, and they paid Mike's sister $1 to let the kids in and out. This was a massive win-win for everybody involved. The neighborhood kids were able to read way more comics in 2 hours than they could buy for 10 cents. Mike's sister got a super easy job that she could multitask while doing her homework. And Mike and Robert were earning almost $10 per week without having to do any labor at all by setting up a scalable, passive income business where they were no longer trading their time for money. Why we gravitate toward the rat race. There are 3 key reasons for why most people stay in the rat race their whole lives. 1. Everybody has a price. He understood that every person has a weak and needy part of their soul that can be bought, and he knew that every individual also had a part of their soul that was resilient and could never be bought. It was only a question of which one was stronger. If you've seen the 2009 hit movie Up in the Air, there's a really great scene where George Clooney's character, a management consultant responsible for helping a company lay off a bunch of its employees, was in the process of laying off J.K. Simmons' character, the employee. And the employee understandably gets very upset, saying how he has a mortgage and bills and his daughter's clubs and activities that he has to pay for. But Clooney tries to paint the situation in a positive light. He pulls up the employee's resume and says that he saw that before the employee became a paper-pushing drone at this corporation, he minored in French culinary arts and bussed tables at a prestigious restaurant to support himself. It was clear that his real dream was to become a chef. And he looks at the employee in the eyes and he says, "How much did they first pay you to give up on your dreams? You live all your life playing it safe, doing the right things, saving yourself for some event that never happens, and then you die a boring old man. You really wanted to win, but the fear of losing was greater than the excitement of winning." 2. Each year, we dig a deeper hole. The more we have to lose, the greater the fear of loss bubbles up inside of us. And what do most people do as soon as they start earning more money? They start getting deeper into consumer debt. They buy a car that requires monthly payments for the next 5 to 7 years. They buy a house that requires expensive mortgage payments for the next 30 years. They buy a dog that requires pet food and vet bills every month. And before they know it, they've dug themselves into a trap because they literally can no longer afford to take risks and pursue business ventures. All their time has to be taken up by a job because that's what guarantees that they'll be able to make good on the financial commitments that they've created for themselves. If you find you have dug yourself into a hole, stop digging. 3. Mental conditioning. For the first 18 to 22 years of our lives, both in school and through societal influences, the way we're taught to use our brains is fairly one-dimensional. If we're not good at math, the solution is to work harder at math until we get good. If we're not good at history, the solution is to work harder at memorizing all the historical facts. By the time we reach adulthood, our brains are conditioned in a way that any time we run into a difficult challenge, the first and often only approach that we take is we just work harder. This is so problematic because it's oftentimes directly counterproductive to what we should be doing, which is taking a step back and thinking of an alternative approach. Instead of just getting up and going to work because not having the money to pay your bills is scaring you, ask yourself, is working harder at this the best solution to this problem? Most people are too afraid to rationally think things through and instead run out the door to a job they hate. Lesson 2. Why teach financial literacy? They don't teach this in school. Money without financial intelligence is money soon gone. How many times have you heard of pro athletes or lottery winners or formerly famous celebrities who earned an enormous amount of wealth only to lose everything within just a few short years because they didn't understand financial literacy? It's hard to blame them because they don't really teach these things in most schools. Schools teach you how to be great employees, not employers. They teach you how to work hard for your money, but not how to make your money work hard for you, a skill that the book argues is infinitely more valuable. And it's a shame too, because as we dive into the details of this book, you'll see that these concepts are not rocket science, and they can be taught fairly quickly. Assets versus liabilities. The book offers a bit of an oversimplified versions of assets, liabilities, balance sheets, and income statements. But trust me, I have a degree in finance, I worked on Wall Street and in consulting, and I think Kiyosaki's simple explanation of these topics is the best way to think about them, and it can be really helpful to simplify things down to their core ideas. Rule 1. You must know the difference between an asset and a liability, and buy assets. An asset puts money in my pocket. A liability takes money out of my pocket. Let's take a look at Kiyosaki's balance sheet and income statement. Your income statement has 2 sections, your income and your expenses. Your balance sheet also has 2 sections, assets and liabilities. Anything you buy that increases the number in your income section is an asset. Anything you buy that increases the number in your expenses section is a liability. The goal should be to direct as much of your money as possible to buy assets that increase your income. Yet most people do the exact opposite. Their only source of income is their job, and almost everything they buy is a liability. Their car, their TV, and yes, even their house. I know this is going to be a controversial one, so let's dive into it a bit more. Your home is not an asset. Rich people acquire assets. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets. One of the hallmarks of the American dream is to buy and own a home. I agree with the book that this is a terrible decision. And again, I have a degree in finance, I worked in the financial sector, and I can speak from real-world experience because I did buy a house a few years back, a decision I now view as regrettable and unwise. I'll go into a lot more detail in a future episode that breaks down all the reasons for why this is the case, so if that's something you're interested in, be sure to subscribe so you're notified when that video comes out. Lesson 3. Mind your business. The difference between your profession and your business. The rich focus on their asset columns, while everyone else focuses on their income statements. Kiyosaki argues that it's completely fine to use a 9-to-5 job as a starting point. After all, that's what he did. But the point that he makes is that it shouldn't be the end-all be-all. While he spent several years working as a door-to-door salesman at Xerox, he spent his evenings and weekends taking seminars on real estate and alternative investments, and in just a few years was generating more revenue from his investments than his day job. Spending the majority of your time and energy on your employer and neglecting building your own asset column will only drain you and make someone else's business rich. The mistake in becoming what you study is that too many people forget to mind their own business. They spend their lives minding someone else's business and making that person rich. Where to allocate your focus? You might be wondering at this point, all right, how exactly do I go about growing my asset column? While starting a business is an example given several times already, that's not necessarily the only path. Anything that you can use to allow your wealth to grow and compound, specifically without having to trade your time for it, is key. The book offers several examples of suggestions, including businesses that don't require your presence to operate, stocks, bonds, income-generating real estate, royalties from intellectual property like music or patents, anything else that can generate a predictable income or value appreciation. It's important to remember that you don't need to deprive yourself of the joys of life in a never-ending pursuit of money. The idea is this: if you want to buy luxurious things like a fancy car or golf clubs, you can absolutely do that, but do so with a passive income that you've generated from your assets, rather than spending all your income on luxuries and consumer consumption before you've ever actually built an asset. Employees aren't necessarily human. All right, this is a pretty polarizing and clickbaity headline, but let me explain. All human employees are definitely human and should be treated as such. But humans aren't the only types of employees. Every dollar that you're able to save is a dollar that you're able to invest and put to work to passively earn you more dollars in the future without you having to give up more of your time. This is a concept we go into great detail on in my book summary of The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clausen, so if that's a topic you're interested in, be sure to check that video out. I'll link it below in the description. Each dollar in my asset column was a great employee, making more employees to buy the boss a new Porsche. Lesson 4. The power of corporations. Why the rich have an advantage. Every time people try to punish the rich don't simply comply, they react. They have the money, power, and intent to change things. They don't just sit there and voluntarily pay more taxes. Kiyosaki argues that it's vital to always be improving your financial intelligence, which he segments into 4 categories: accounting, investing, understanding the markets, and the law. By gaining a solid understanding of these 4 areas, you can utilize many of the same strategies that the rich use to significantly reduce your tax liabilities. If you choose to stay ignorant on these topics, then the system will always be stacked against you. Here's one example. If you're an employee working at someone else's company, the life cycle of your money looks something like this. 1, you earn it. 2, you pay taxes. And 3, you spend what's left over. Because of the way the system is structured, if on average you pay 25% in taxes, that means you're working the first 3 months of every year completely for free in servitude to the government. By creating a business entity and taking advantage of all the tax benefits, you shift to a new process that looks like this. 1, you earn money, 2, you spend the money. 3, you pay taxes on anything left over. My highly educated dad always encouraged me to land a good job with a strong corporation. He spoke of the virtues of working your way up the corporate ladder. He didn't understand that by relying solely on a paycheck from a corporate employer, I would be a docile cow ready for milking. When I told my rich dad of my father's advice, he only chuckled. "Why not own the ladder?" was all he said. It doesn't need to be complicated. When people think about business entities or corporations, they often think about giant buildings with hundreds of employees. That's not necessarily the case. A business entity is just a legal document, and literally anybody can start one by filling out a few forms. There are many different types of business entities, especially in the United States, like LLCs, S-Corps, and C-Corps, and many different tax strategies associated with each of them. And so Kiyosaki recommends that you find a good tax advisor and a good attorney on your journey to building wealth. They're worth their weight in gold. Smart tax consultants and attorneys are worth their cost, as it's still cheaper than paying the government. It's expensive to not know the law. Lesson 5. The rich invent money. Failure is good. Often in the real world, it's not the smart who get ahead, but the bold. Piggybacking off an earlier topic of how our current education system trains us to think the wrong way, Robert discusses another reason for why he dislikes the way schools teach so much. It's because they ingrain in our minds that making mistakes is bad and we're punished for making them. For example, if you get a question wrong on your homework or on an exam, that's points taken off. Once they get to the real world, that line of thinking paired with people's natural ego results in them never winning because they're so afraid of losing. But the best way humans learn is by making mistakes. People who avoid failure also avoid success. Speed to action is key. Opportunities that existed yesterday might no longer exist tomorrow. That's why it's so important to gain the courage to take action quickly when opportunities present themselves. Robert tells the story about how he bought run-down houses under foreclosure for pennies on the dollar and was able to sell them almost immediately for a massive profit, something very few people were doing at the time, but is much more difficult to do successfully today. I had my own experience on this topic where in 2015 and 2016, I could easily run Facebook and Instagram ads for just a few dollars and get tens of thousands of impressions with extremely high sales conversion rates, earning six-figure profits while barely working 15 hours a week because there was so little competition. But in 2023, something like that is far more difficult to pull off. Robert gives additional examples of how there were people he knew in his youth who were extremely wealthy but couldn't keep up with the changing times and ended up losing everything, while at the same time, there's new multimillionaires getting minted every day now. Just like evolution by natural selection isn't based on who's the strongest or even who's the smartest, but who is the most adaptable to change, your likelihood of success is similarly based on your ability to keep up with the changing times and quickly identifying new opportunities. Lesson 6. Work to learn, not to earn. Broaden your skill sets. When it comes to money, the only skill most people know is to work hard. It is shocking how many talented and well-educated people earn so little money. Kiyosaki gives the example of a skilled mechanic who was able to identify the issue with Robert's car immediately just by listening to the sound of the engine, but still doesn't earn very much money at his job. He tells the story of a talented newspaper writer and fan of his that he met at a conference. She had a master's degree in English, but was unsuccessful at getting her book out there. She thought, if her work is good, it should sell itself. Robert recommended that she leave her job at the newspaper and instead work at an advertising agency, take some courses on copywriting and sales, and learn public relations to figure out how to get millions in free publicity, and then spend her nights and weekends on her passion project of writing her novel. Then she could combine all these skills to synergize and propel her career forward. And how did the newspaper writer react to this advice? She was offended. She thought that because she has a degree in English and specializes in writing, that she should somehow be above learning sales and marketing. Kiyosaki reminds her that the cover of his own book says, best-selling author, not best writing author. 90% of people listening to the summary can probably cook a better hamburger than McDonald's, but almost certainly make less money than McDonald's. Don't just focus on getting really good at your single narrow skill set. Find complementary skill sets that can synergize to exponentially boost your success far more than if you simply focused on working harder on your one skill. They are one skill away from great wealth. Generalization beats specialization. When Robert finished school, he got an amazing job for an oil company, where he had great pay, vacation time, benefits, and opportunities for promotion. His poor dad was extremely proud of him, but after 6 months, he quit, which devastated his poor dad. Instead of climbing the corporate ladder, he started job hopping a lot. He joined the Marine Corps to learn to fly and to be a leader. He joined Xerox because they had a great salesperson development program. He spent time shadowing the business meetings of his rich dad to learn the intricacies of law and accounting. While he earned less money in the short term, Robert was playing the long game by collecting all these different skills that he eventually combined to form his empire today. His rich dad advised him that it's better to learn a little bit about a lot of different things so that you can synergize those skills together to propel yourself forward. This again runs counter to what the corporate and academic worlds incentivize you to do, which is to specialize. The more specialized you become, the more you are trapped and dependent on that specialty. Lesson 7. The 5 common roadblocks to financial independence. Even after many people become financially literate and they gain all the technical skills and the knowledge they need, they often still run into roadblocks that prevent them from succeeding. Kiyosaki discusses what he believes are the 5 most common obstacles. Fear. In all my years, I have never met a rich person who has never lost money. But I've met a lot of poor people who have never lost a dime. Investing, that is. The fear of losing money is real. Everyone has it, even the rich. But it's not fear that is the problem. It's how you handle fear. This is a difficult obstacle to overcome because studies show that people feel twice as much pain when they lose something as the joy they gain when they obtain something of equal value. We're literally hardwired to fear loss more than we crave gain. Successful or not, Robert argues that all of us experience that feeling of fear and uneasiness. What makes all the difference, however, is how you react to that fear and how you react to losing. When it comes to fear, do you let it control you, or do you push back against it and build the courage to take a bit of calculated risk? In the past, when you've experienced losing or failing, do you feel down and upset about it? Or do you treat it like a video game where you had fun giving it a try and you're excited to give it another go? The greatest secret of winners is that failure inspires winning. Thus, they're not afraid of losing. Cynicism. All too often, people around us, even friends and family, put limiting beliefs into our minds, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Think back to the past when you've mentioned some type of adventure or idea that you want to try out. How often was the person's first reaction some reason for why it wouldn't work? How often have you heard things like, that idea would never work, or if it's such a good idea, why hasn't someone else already done it? Or what are you going to do when that doesn't work out? These limiting beliefs and self-doubts can get louder and louder in your subconscious, eventually paralyzing you from ever taking real action. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Henry Ford. The book offers a good rule of thumb for how to filter out what's actually good advice and what is just cynical noise that needs to be tuned out. Here it is. Don't take advice from people who haven't already succeeded in the area that you're trying to succeed in. Why listen to your neighbor who's telling you that you're paying too much on your real estate deal when they themselves have never purchased a property? Billionaire investor Warren Buffett also has a good quote on this topic, especially as it relates to finding investment opportunities. Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. Laziness. The most common form of laziness? Laziness by staying busy. If you look back on what you've spent your time on over the last 52 weekends, how much of it was actually meaningful and truly essential to improving the quality of your life? Oftentimes, we load up our schedule with meaningless busywork to rationalize to ourselves why we just don't have the time or energy to chase after an ambitious goal. We cover this deceptively self-destructive behavior in my book summary of Essentialism by Greg McKeown, so if this is a topic that you're interested in diving into further, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified when that video comes out. Kiyosaki argues that a good solution for this type of behavior is to have a little greed. When you're outside and you see a 30-year-old who is able to retire early and drive a brand new Mercedes, if your initial thought is, that's just unrealistic for me, that's the lazy way out. because your brain can just accept that as true and not have to work anymore. But if you change your mindset, where your initial thought is, how can I achieve that for myself? That's when the magic begins. That's when your brain starts turning the gears and thinking about ideas and looking for opportunities. Bad habits. Our lives are a reflection of our habits more than our education. Having the right mindset and habits is important. Get in the habit of paying yourself first. Otherwise, you'll be kicked around by other people taking your money, like the government, landlords, and other bill collectors. If you worry that you won't have enough left over to pay them, use that as a motivation to increase your earning potential. It can help light a fire under you. When you observe other people's success that you wish you could emulate, get in the habit of thinking, how can I do that? Instead of, I can't do that. Some people see Arnold Schwarzenegger and ask, I wonder what habits he has to get into good shape like that. While other people believe, he just got lucky with genetics on their way to pick up more beers. Arrogance. What I know makes me money. What I don't know loses me money. Every time I have been arrogant, I have lost money. Because when I'm arrogant, I truly believe that what I don't know is not important. It's important to be confident enough in your ability to achieve anything, but also humble enough to know that you don't currently know everything that you need to know. Figure out what knowledge gaps you currently have, and then find books to read and experts to talk to on those subjects. Lesson 8. Getting started. There are opportunities everywhere, but most people haven't honed their minds to be able to see them. Here are 10 steps you can start taking today on your path to financial freedom. 1. Start with why. You won't be able to push yourself consistently enough or long enough to build good habits if you don't have a clear picture in your mind for what your actual goal or purpose is. So make 2 lists. All the things in your life that you do want, like the ability to travel, spend time with your kids, or learn different hobbies. And then also list out all the things that you don't want, like having to give up 5 days a week to go to a job that you don't like, being tied down to one location, and having your travel opportunities limited to just 3 weeks out of every year. Refer to this list daily to keep yourself on track and help you push through those mental blocks. 2. Choose correctly each day. Every day you have opportunities to make choices. When it comes to choices about how you spend your time and your money, strive to make the right choices every single day. When you spend time consuming content, choose books, courses, and seminars instead of television. When you spend your money, choose to spend it on cash-generating assets or on education, where you can learn new ideas and new ways to tackle existing problems. 3. Choose your friends wisely. The importance of this cannot be overstated. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around, so build a close circle of friends with the same goals and interests as you. You'll all grow together. 4. Don't stop at mastering one topic. The world today is changing faster than ever before, and your success depends on how quickly you're able to learn and apply new information. So never stop learning. Set aside an annual budget and time allocation to take new courses, go to new seminars and conferences, and to meet new people. Even if what you learn isn't directly applicable at the moment, the more you put yourself out there and learn new things, the more likely you are to strike gold. 5. Pay yourself first. Keep your consumer expenses low. If you really want to buy that fancy car or big house, only do it after you've purchased enough cash-generating assets to cover those purchases. If you get yourself deep into consumer debt, you'll get yourself stuck in the rat race. Try to avoid dipping into your savings immediately whenever life brings up necessary expenses. Instead, use that stress and pressure to drive you in finding new ways to increase your earnings. Your savings should be out there earning even greater savings. 6. Good advice is life's greatest shortcut. Don't try to learn everything on your own if you can avoid it. You can't be an expert in everything. Find people who are great experts in their field and pay them for their knowledge and services. It can save you years of failure and trial and error that you would have spent by trying to go it alone. Kiyosaki switched tax advisors because his old CPA was just a regular small business accountant, while his new CPA was also a real estate investor himself, something that aligned much more closely with what Robert was doing. There is a huge difference between a good professional and a great one. Find the great ones, add them to your team, and pay them what they're worth. You'll both end up making more money together. 7. Always run the numbers. When looking at an investment, one of the very first calculations you should be doing is figuring out How quickly will I earn back my initial investment? If you watch the TV show Shark Tank, billionaire investor Kevin O'Leary always runs the numbers and rhetorically asks, how quickly am I getting my money back? 8. Buy luxuries with your fruit, not your seeds. Break the bad habit of borrowing money to buy the luxuries of life. There's nothing wrong with wanting luxurious things because life is meant to be enjoyed. But build the discipline to first build up your cash-generating assets and use the earnings generated from those assets to then buy things to enjoy. 9. Find heroes. Don't go it alone. Find heroes who both inspire you and who you can learn from. If you want to be a great stock investor, learn from the best there is, Warren Buffett. Watch what he invests in and read the information he puts out publicly every year in his investor letters. We do this really well when we're kids and our heroes are sports stars, but for some reason, we stop trying to emulate heroes as adults. The author recommends to never stop. Learn as much as you can about your heroes and use that information to emulate their success. 10. Give and you shall receive. If you want something from the universe, you should also try to put that same thing into the universe first. Donate to your favorite charities, help people find the contacts they need, volunteer at your local organizations. Be generous with what you have and with sharing the information you know. The author gives the example of a wood-burning stove. You can't tell the stove, first give me heat and then I'll put some wood in you. Lesson 9. Mindset adjustments. The book wraps up with a couple final pieces of advice on how you should adjust your mindset. Look for good deals, not just popular ones. Remember Warren Buffett's quote, "Be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful"? Robert's neighbor bought a condo for $100,000, while Robert bought an identical one next door for just $50,000, which he was able to do by taking a weekend seminar on how to buy at a foreclosure auction. Robert's neighbor said that he didn't have the time or money to waste on such a class, although he apparently does have the money to overpay for a condo by $50,000. A great way to learn about great deals that may not be popular is by talking to people. Find experts and offer to take them out for a 15-minute coffee chat. Attend conferences and seminars and talk to people in the hallways. Build a close network of friends who specialize in an area and who enjoy sharing industry tips about what's been working for them. Rapid change is possible. Don't let the government's retirement age of 62 years old be the target that you set for yourself. And don't be discouraged thinking that it'll take decades to reach a level of success. Apply your best level of focus and energy, and great things can happen. Robert tells the story about how he read a book on investing in tax liens, and then went to the county tax office and found the employee who worked in that office. He then found out that she invested in tax liens as well, so he took her out to lunch and learned all about that area of investing from her. In less than 2 short weeks, he went from knowing nothing about the topic to now owning investments earning him 16% interest. I had a similar experience myself where in 2015, I made a few new friends who were really big into e-commerce. We worked out a deal where they taught me what they knew, and in less than 4 months, I launched a store that was earning close to $500,000 in sales, of which about $200,000 was net profit. Rapid change is possible, but you must be focused and energetic with your actions. The key is to work smart, not just hard. All right, that wraps up our video. I hope this summary has been helpful, and I hope that you're able to use the concepts from this book to start and improve your journey to financial independence. And a really quick note, if you want to be able to easily refer back to all these lessons from the book, I'd like to send you the mind map that you saw throughout the video. It's 100% totally free. If you click the link in the description, I'm happy to send it to you. And if you already subscribed to my newsletter, this mind map should already be sitting in your inbox. I also recommend picking up a copy of the full book as it contains far more stories and examples that really illustrate how these concepts can be applied in daily life. If you enjoyed this summary and you want to see more just like it, please do me a huge favor by hitting that like and subscribe button. It really helps support me in making more content just like this. Thanks again so much for watching. Good luck in your adventure, and I'll see you in the next one.